What year were you drafted for the war?
I was in the Marine Corps when the war came along.
Oh.
So I was a 20-year Marine.
Your biggest concern when you were going to the Vietnam War?
Vietnam War, am I going to live? Go back home?
Yeah.
I went twice.
Wow, how old were you?
I was there in 1965 or 64. Time I came back was like in 73. I wasn't there that whole time.
What were your hopes for the Vietnam War?
That it would get over and we'd win. But that's all just a part of the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Were you in support with the people back home of just wanting it to end?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your first reaction when you actually landed in the country of Vietnam? Do you remember what you were thinking?
Yeah, what a hellhole. But I guess to put that more succinctly is how bad the conditions are that the people that live there have to live under.
Really?
And how different it is than back home.
How did you adapt to those surroundings, or did you ever adapt to those surroundings?
Yeah, you have to, and I did. Guess you go along with the program and do the best you can. Yeah.
What were your living conditions like?
Oh, the living conditions were not bad. We lived in French barracks. The French had been there
French barracks?
before we were there. So we lived in their barracks.
Mm-hmm.
They are in tents.
What was that like?
You live in tents, you live in tents. It's not like here. It's just so different than here.
Was it mostly different because of the climate and stuff? The temperature over here?
Where did you grow up, or where were you living in the United States?
At the time that I went to Vietnam, I was living in California.
Were there any things that you could try to force yourself to connect with between the two lands?
Well, we're so much more advanced than they are.
Uh-huh.
So the transportation is always a surprise that the way they live, their conditions versus our conditions. You know.
Uh-huh.
We are a very modern society, and of course they were not. And they were living under war conditions too. It's hard to move from one part to another. But we just get on a bus or get on a train and go.
And they had to walk everywhere.
Yeah.
And
for the most part. Or people who did have cars that were so antiquated compared to what we have.
What was it like bonding with them over there? Or did you have time to bond?
You really don't have time. You think of life between civilians and military.
So you don't really find much in common?
No, not really.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a different lifestyle.
Yeah. We're from the U.S. in the Marine Corps, like you. Was it hard, or would you guys have each other's back? Was there like a real trust thing because you guys were both from the
yeah, we were real trusting. Yeah. So that wasn't hard. Difficult in terms of people to people would be Americans and how we got along with the South Vietnamese people.
Did you ever feel like you achieved your goal as a soldier? That you proved something?
We're not trying to accomplish anything other than to meet the needs of the Vietnamese people. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, you can't believe what's on TV or in the movies. The real thing is different. They make it to what they want a movie to be like. Yeah, I was more interested in doing the job that we needed to do so that the war would be over. Yeah.
How did the war affect you as an individual?
I guess it taught me to be happy about what we have as opposed to what they had to deal with. Not so much value thing, just a way of life.
So do you mean look at things a little bit differently than you've seen before?
Yeah. Be more thankful for what we had, opposed to being sorry for what they had. You didn't have time to do all of that. War is so difficult, period. And the Vietnam War was even more difficult because we were a part of South Vietnam, and there was always North Vietnam too, which was the enemy.
And when you came home, did you feel like there was any hostility towards you for being there?
No.
No.
Not really.
Yeah.
And it was tough. It's always tough for a wife and kids to get along without the husband. you gotta experience what you gotta experience. And nobody can tell you about it really, so that it helps, I guess. I don't want to think, or you to think that other people that saw it more difficult didn't see it more difficult. It was more difficult for them. Everybody's story is the way their story is, you know.
There's always a hint, a little change, a slightly different story.
Yeah.
For every Marine that's been in the war, of course.
Idea about the Vietnam War is it was different for everybody at different times. And so I feel very fortunate in that it wasn't that difficult for me. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't that hard. It wasn't like it was in the Second World War.